You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
All right, we got something to address off the top here. Tammy Marin, one of our favorite here in the chat, writes in, important question. When is Leafs Nation store getting coffee mugs? Asking for Rosie so he doesn't have to keep his wife's mugs. Also need to add another one to my collection. We got a one screen on me right now. Tammy, if you look closely behind me, a couple coffee mugs. Those are the only two coffee mugs in the world right now. Leafs Morning Take coffee mugs. So there you go, Rosie.
Tammy, what do you have against my wife's mugs? And that sunset one is my mug of me putting at Cabot Cliffs. So I don't know. I don't need one, obviously. You can get one, though, Tammy. Yeah, we'll get those in the store soon. I like a good mug.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know about you when you do this show. I definitely drink a coffee. Are you a coffee drinker on this show?
Yeah, I had two already today, so I don't have a third. But yeah, I almost always have one on me. Yeah, and we should have a mug. What's going on?
No, that's fair. Honestly, I kid you not, about 3 weeks ago, the powers that be, I had a extensive phone conversation. I said, number one, I want a t-shirt that says Leafs Morning Take, pretty simple. And number two, we need coffee mugs. Like, that's been a big topic of conversation on the show. So they will be coming to the Nation Gear store eventually. Again, I have the only two, and they're on my display behind me. But what's going on, Rosie?
Love it. Nothing. Just watching other people's teams play hockey. Not
like
mine.
I'm trying to figure out goaltending in this league. Like, we joked about it yesterday, how Vancouver and Edmonton were getting set to square off in a series where it was 2-1 Canucks, and two guys who started the season as third-string netminders were squaring off in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I just can't figure out the position.
It's weird how a bunch of third stringers lately come in and take teams deep, isn't it? Like, for how tough of a position and how important it is, and how razor thin the margins are in the games. These guys, like, it happened with Hill. It happened, Binnington, I think, was that story. It's happening in Vancouver and in Edmonton. It's kind of crazy, and there's still good games, and these guys are rising to the occasion. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, Cal Pickard was a story. Certainly, so much fight in the Vancouver Canucks. That was a wild finish to that hockey game, but the Oilers got what they deserved in that game. They were probably the better team from the puck drop. So it's 2-2 in that series. Man, that series has been so fantastic for so many reasons. Among them, have you seen like the spatting back and forth between the media? I would love to have a series like that here in Toronto. I don't think it would ever happen, but Canucks media, Oilers media going at it, their fan base is going at it like it's a literal war. It's crazy.
I haven't been into it too hardcore, but it's no. I think the Twitter wars of Boston, Toronto are pretty heavy, but I haven't seen it's the real media too with that series. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I mean, the Toronto-Boston one's difficult for me because it's like the who's your daddy moment. Like, I don't think it's a war at all because Boston always beats Toronto. Whereas, like, it's up for grabs here with Edmonton and Vancouver. I'm just stating facts. Like, we've now seen 4 series between the Leafs and the Bruins, and Boston wins every one. So I think until you are victorious, it's not really a war, which is kind of interesting when you phrase it that way. But yeah, like, I think it just adds to the ambiance of what I'm witnessing. If the two fan bases are going at it, there's been some contention in the media. Like, that series is at it all. And I'll be honest, like, I was looking forward to it, and I think it's lived up to expectations so far.
Yeah, I think it's going 7. It's a big one. I was worried for the Oilers Nation there to cough up that lead, but lo and behold, they pulled it off with 38 seconds left. Was pretty impressive. I thought it was going to set up to be maybe a heartbreaker. I had some buddies at the game, and they were coming home pretty happy.
You've been watching the World Championship at all?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen it on. I've been busy as hell, so no, I haven't. But I heard Johnny T stepped up.
Yeah, so, I mean, I was watching this game in real time after the gym yesterday, and I'm like, man, I feel like I'm watching the Maple Leafs, dude. They're up 6-1 in the third period against Austria. They found a way to blow it. Then who else? John Tavares scores an OT, and then it was vintage JT. And thanks to TSN for the video here, as you see on your screen. But it was vintage JT in the interview after the game. He called it a huge lesson early in the tournament. So we're still learning lessons for John Tavares.
God, I love those lessons. I love it when Johnny's learning.
When's the
them.
exam, Rosie? When is the exam? What am I studying for, bud?
It's every spring, buddy, and they fail and get held back a grade every spring. Not this coming one though, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be our year. 2025 is the year of the Maple Leaf. I think Mike Myers is gonna make a brand new movie, and it's gonna excel at the box office, even though he hasn't made a movie in 20 years, I think.
I'm not sure about 25, but 26, I think they'll actually Tree Living's fingerprints will be on this. They'll have some cap room to go get what they actually need, and I think Draisaitl might be up around that time. Might be linking arms with Mr. Connor McDavid. They live in Toronto. They train in Toronto. I'm just throwing ideas out there and seeing where they land. But
That's the most realistic statement I think you've ever made on this show in like nearly 2 years of doing it, where it's like this whole year you're like they're winning the cup, and I'm like I don't know which team you're watching when you compare them around the league, but I think if you want to look at the map to success, I think that would allow Brad Treliving to cook for what 2+ years before they make a potential run. Like I think I want to see some building blocks put in place this summer, but I think the important thing to stress is next off season, right? We're always looking ahead here in Leafs Nation, but Marner's off the books. John Tavares is off the books, among others.
I know you open up that. What's that? 20,
It's a lot of
22
money.
million,
Yeah.
21 million bucks. That's a lot of money. Cap goes up. All of a sudden you have a lot of cash to play with. And, you want to talk about learning lessons and whatnot. I don't know if the players are learning the lessons, but I think the management and ownership is learning the lessons. And I think they're going to, go fishing for a more well-rounded playoff team in the playoffs. I mean, you hear last night, talk about we had 6 passengers out there, and that is what it looks like in the playoffs when you have passengers, guys that are watching, that are waiting for something good to happen, that are trying to like pick their spots, and it just doesn't come. And it's like, dude, this is a playoffs. You got to get in there every shift and make something happen. Nothing's going to come to you. And I think the Leafs have been caught doing that a fair bit. And, if you do that, if you have enough guys that are doing that, especially if they're your high dollar guys, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. And that's just the way it goes in the playoffs. If I watch the Florida Panthers, they don't have any passengers. They have everyone just one track mind, and it's go. And that's the playoffs, and that's who has success. So, you talk about learning lessons. I'm hoping that the management has learned their lesson, and they need to get guys that are willing to go to war.
I would say that the Leafs have a very entitled approach to the way they play hockey in the Stanley Cup playoffs for the most part. But there's a guy in Vancouver right now who's taking considerable heat. Reminds me of a guy in Toronto, Elias Pettersson. You see some of the tweets last night?
I know I haven't been on. What is he getting ripped?
Yeah, he's getting the heat. The guy's been a total passenger. He's been a ghost for the majority of the playoff games thus far, which again is very troublesome considering the contract he just signed. What is it with these guys?
Yeah. I don't know. You look at Elias Pettersson. I don't see him being like a Mr. Go to War type guy. And he's putting up a few points, isn't he? But obviously not giving enough, or what?
He's just a passenger. Like you need your star players to be in the thick of things. They can't be like
You got to
they
get
can't be
dirty.
in the periphery, you know?
No, you can't stay on the perimeter. You can't wait for the soft spots for the puck to come to you. Everyone else is just battling. It's not the regular season where guys are just kind of in their position and you get your little soft spots and shit. It's not every goal is the end of the world in the playoffs, and guys are battling tooth and nail for every inch out there. And if you got a guy that's not, and he's taking up X amount of ice time, X amount of cap space, it crushes you, man. We've seen it a million times. It's not like this epiphany that we're coming up with right now. It's always been that way. And I think when you build your team, I don't know if it's now more than ever, but the difference between regular season and playoffs, we've been preaching that, is huge. And if you have a guy that's like just not really, just doesn't have that intensity factor and not willing to ramp it up, and his competitive edge is more like, I hope I get my cookies, not like I'll go through a wall for the team. It's a difference in competitiveness. The guy that's kind of just waiting for his own cookies and hoping things happen, it just never fucking pans out. It doesn't matter how good you are. You can be a 5-time all-star. You can have 100 points in the season. I don't care. But you don't go to war in the playoffs. The cream always rises to the top, and it's never those soft players in the playoffs. Never, literally never. And the guys that are the big boys with the big contracts, with the, win all the trophies and all that stuff, that have Stanley Cups. They have that edge to them, that competitive edge, saying, get on my back, boys. I'll show you how it's done. And then everyone else just follows suit. And those are the Stanley Cup champion winning teams. And we know who's got it and who doesn't. And hopefully the Maple Leafs are headed in that direction.
If you don't believe us, go check out Game 5 tonight between Colorado and Dallas, and go watch a desperate Nathan McKinnon, a desperate Cale Makar. Those guys are going to put it all on the line, rest assured, in that hockey game. I was loving the vintage Paul Maurice last night too, just snapping on the bench. I love what he said after the game about profanity. They needed a bit of profanity in their lives. Nothing wrong with that. Guy's an absolute beauty. And again, it's interesting because he's coached in this market. He's felt it before, but he's done such a tremendous job, like an absolutely tremendous job with that Florida Panthers roster. And you talk about teams that take on the DNA of their head coach. Look no further than Florida, who, again, I know they lost, and a big-time effort for Boston without their captain, but I still, long-term, I love Florida in these playoffs.
Yeah, me too. That next series, I kind of have my money on it being Florida Rangers, and it's going to be a monster series. I'm kind of looking forward to that. If that in fact happens, who knows? But I think Florida is going to come out of that series. I do think they're the better team. Speaking of profanity, you hear that OHL story?
No, bring it to light.
So the OHL, what would it be? Western Finals. Two teams, London and Saginaw, I think. One kid's shooting up his shoulder with lidocaine or whatever to try to play. The other guy on the other team knows it. He says, I'm coming after you. I'm going to break your shoulder. And he goes, you're too much of a pussy to do that. And the guy goes, did you hear that, ref? Did you hear that, ref? Misconduct, 5-game suspension for saying pussy in major junior hockey. You can threaten violence and to take out a guy's injury, but you say something rude and it's a 5-gamer and there's no appeal. There's no due process. I feel like I'm living in an alternate universe right now that actually happened. And some guy in the hockey world thought that was the correct response. It was in the Hockey News. Googled the Hockey News article. I was in absolute shock reading it.
Number one, who tattletales? I mean, maybe it's indicative of the times in 2024, especially to the ref. And number two, I would be completely lost in how to chirp somebody, the opposition.
Well, what do you say? Like, you can't say pussy. It's it's derogatory. The roots of the word or the female anatomy. Like, I don't care if you think that's the most disgusting word on the planet and you want it abolished from everyone's vernacular. That's fine. But if you do use it, what is it? It's rude. It's a rude thing to say. And you're giving a guy 5-game suspension in the playoffs, like detrimental to his career, for saying something rude in the it just, my mind is just melted by this one. Not to mention a guy literally threatens violence against him, but no, a rude word is 10 times worse, obviously, than than threatening a guy's to go after a guy's injury. It just blows my mind what's happening over there. The powers that be need to give their head a shake. This world is upside down. I think it's swinging back the other way, but I read that and I couldn't believe my eyes, man. Like, do you know how many suspensions, if you're going to do that, you're going to dole out in a game? 25.
Yeah, the thing that gets me is, like, I think we're more and more, not to get political, we're living in a country where we can no longer defend ourselves. Like, the big story in Toronto is like thieves stealing our cars, and now they're promoting like, hey, give them your keys, pretty much. Like, well, what are we doing? I was taught to defend myself growing up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it's swinging back the other way, and yeah, not to get that down, but that's hockey related. And a 5-game suspension for saying you're a pussy to a guy in, like, and that poor guy, like, where's the heads up on that? But that's been commonplace for decades. That kid, like, do you want to know how many times you'd hear worse than that on the ice in a major junior game? And then just out of the clear blue sky, it violated the anti-bullying terms of the Ontario Hockey League, and it's a 5-gamer. I'd like to grab that guy, that commissioner of that league, and shake him around a little bit. Like, are you out of your mind?
I would love to see a playbook on what you can and cannot say. And to that point, I just don't know how you chirp the opposition. Like, part of hockey, part of playing hockey is chirping. When you can't do that, it's no fun in my world. But anyways, we got Dave Panota coming up in a couple minutes. We're going to break down the very latest on the coaching search. It's gone rather quiet for a variety of reasons. So we'll get to that conversation coming up with DP. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. For the very latest on what's transpiring behind the scenes here at the Leafs Nation 401. If you're watching right now, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, Leafs Morning Take. wherever you find your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review as well. The opening segment is brought to you by Greta Bar YYZ. For a good time, find Greta, 590 King Street West. Weekly specials, live sports, over 60-plus arcade games. Let the games begin. Go big. Go to Greta Bar YYZ. Now, we touched on this a bit yesterday, but they officially launched phase 2 of a $350 million renovation plan firmly underway at Scotiabank Arena, Rosie. Oh, baby.
Yeah, I know. I saw in the notes here, like, does that entice people to come or whatever, like free agents to sign because they're renovating it? What is in there? There's like a player access lounge or something like that, or something to that effect. I don't.
Yeah, so part of it is the goal is to enhance the in-arena experience for all venue tenants, including the Maple Leafs. Complete renovation of the first section of the 100-level concourse. Thank you to CP24 for the viz you see on your screen right now. They want to add a second Real Sports apparel retail store on the 100-level concourse. Introduction of a brand new social club with player access. So I think it'll be a bit different. You know, when the players come on the ice, they're going to have something made up like a tunnel or something where you can see the players, so you can get closer to the action. Pretty much that's the sort of breakdown on what's transpiring there.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, yeah, they're keeping it updated. You don't want a dilapidated building. I think that's good for them and the Raptors and the Leafs, and it's all good. But as far as getting free agents and stuff like that, I mean, that would be an absolute footnote in the conversation of, oh, by the way, they're renovating. What? You didn't mention that? Well, let's scratch what we got going on here and take the other deal in Toronto because of the new concourse. Yeah, not really, but it's good they're throwing money at it. I mean, they should. They make hand over fist, and they should keep that place as nice as possible.
Yeah, my breakdown is they're sprucing shit up. That was my Cole's notes, which is always great to see. But I did have that in the notes because I was sort of reading articles on the story from Tuesday, and one of them suggested that it would help lure free agents. And I wanted to ask somebody who has played in this league, who has been a free agent, if players even care about that type of stuff. Do they really?
Like I said, it's a footnote on the
Yeah.
side of the thing. Or like, no, you're just talking city in general, organization, who's on the team depth chart, and what's my contract look like? What's the money? What's the term? That's going to get the job done, whether you play in Nassau Coliseum or the new Oilers barn. Like it's kind of irrelevant. But once you're close to a deal done, it's like, oh yeah, they're renovating it. It's going to be nice. It's like, okay, cool. It's a footnote, but better than nothing, that's for sure.
Well, that's exactly it, because let's not lose sight of the fact that there were plenty of players who chose and elect to sign in Arizona with a college barn. Like I think as long as you're in the show, I don't think you're really going to care, especially if it's like a place like Toronto. Oh, their in-house isn't up to standards. Like I don't think it's a big conversation. I think where it gets interesting for sure is like the training facility, practice. Like for example, as you know, a lot of the players live in Etobicoke because it's closer to the practice rink. Like that type of stuff, I think makes more sense to care about. No.
Yeah, I think so. City layout, that kind of thing. I mean, there's guys with families, like where are we going to live?
Yeah.
What's the school setup like? And those kind of things come into play as much as how fancy is my dressing room and whatnot. And you're playing for the Maple Leafs, dude. Everything's top notch, high class. There's nothing that you could need that you wouldn't be able to get. So it's all good in that department. And yeah, that practice facility which you're at probably 85% of the time, it's new, it's big, it's got everything you need. There's a whole hydrotherapy section to it, everything you need. So I don't think if anyone's on the fence of signing with Toronto or not, that the facilities are either going to hold it back or get the deal done. It's kind of a footnote, like I said.
I'm just trying to quantify what $350 million is going to buy. Like, how much different is my experience going to be at Scotiabank Arena? A building, as I've referenced, I hate going to watch Leafs games there. It's just like a bore. How much different is it going to be going to Leafs games?
Oh, it'll be totally different, Nick.
Yeah, because what, they got
drastically
new screens?
Don't
Like,
swear for no reason. Remember?
yes. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what it's going to be like. It's not going to be much different. I don't know. Like, it's not a huge deal, but I just where a dollar goes. I remember I flew down to North Dakota to their college barn. It's called the Ralph Engelstad Arena. Ralph Engelstad played goalie for the North Dakota Fighting Sioux, then went on to be a big casino man in Vegas. Lots of money. Built them this rink, and it was $110 million rink. And I don't know what this is, 2003 or 2 or 3. So 22 years ago, Jesus. But it was just like nothing you've ever seen. There was NFL players training there just because the facilities were so unbelievable. The gym, all the granite and marble, and they had leather seats and everything is stitched with that logo. It was absolutely unbelievable. 110 million bucks. No one had ever even heard anything about it. And then not that much later, like 10 years later, MSG has a reno and they put $1 billion in, and you couldn't really tell the difference when you're watching a game. It's absolutely crazy. But 350 mil, yeah, I don't expect it to be a completely different experience going to a game by any stretch.
You know where it'll be affected in terms of beer prices. You'll go from $24 a beer to $28 a beer. That's what they don't want to tell you, but it's true. Like I just try to figure out what this means. Like even it was a whole big deal here in Toronto with Rogers Center where the Blue Jays play. They poured in all this money. What's the difference? I went to a game. Cool. You got a club in center field, whatever. Your team on the field, still shit. Sorry, I swore again. But that's the reality. It's the reality. So
Yeah, it happens. Is it $24 a beer?
close enough. I don't buy beers there anymore, man. It's just like it's gotten so gross. And I can't blame inflation for everything in my life, but you go there and I don't know how I justify, and all the power to everybody who goes and watch a game. I don't blame you. I watch a hockey game, give me a pop. That would be the dream of my life. But it's gotten to a point where if you want to have a couple drinks, bring a date, like you're looking at the most expensive night of your life, and that makes no sense because you love this hockey team.
I know, it's funny. It's too bad. It is too bad, and it's part of the reason why it's it's not as crazy up there. And you look at the Edmonton game last night; they got dummies with their face painted and going bananas, and it's oil and gas guys that are kind of boots on the ground type guy that make a
Yeah.
good dollar and love to spend it at that new rink, and they go crazy, and that makes sense. But unfortunately, the blue collar people that would scream and yell and make that place rock, and their tickets get bought up by the Bay Street guys, and we know that's the problem, and it has been for a long time. But I don't know, maybe those baby boomers are going to start moving out, in a new generation of folks with some cash could actually make that place rock.
Don't forget, they're not here to sell jerseys, Rosie. Never lose sight of that. That was the big marquee line for Keith Pelly at the press conference last
I
Friday.
like that line though.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. We'll see how expensive beers are next season. According to Cap Friendly, the Leafs are only one of 11 teams right now with no dead cap next season, which is kind of remarkable. That includes buyouts, retained salary, recapture penalty, overages. For correlation, an example, Minnesota at 15.1, just over that mil in dead cap. And it's kind of fascinating because Zach Parise and Ryan Suter are playing each other in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but they decided to buy out those contracts a couple years ago. But at the very least, like I think this gives the Maple Leafs some flexibility to do some things which we want to see this summer.
Yeah, it's nice. It means you've got the entire salary cap to put on the ice, and you don't have anything that you're, the dead cap stuff. It hurts, right?
Yeah.
I remember when they signed Parise and Suter there, and the owner was just complaining, bitching at all the other owners, saying this is ridiculous. You've inflated all the salaries and everything, and these contracts are too high. It's ridiculous. And then, like right after saying that, he does Parise and Suter for like $110 million deals. Now they're both bought out, but yeah, that's a kick in the groin when you got $15 million in dead cap. It's basically like, oh, here's your cap at X, and everyone else in the leagues is $15 million more. It makes it very hard to compete. And it's nice that the Leafs don't have those problems. You'd think they would with, they've had injury problems. They've had guys that haven't worked out or panned out. And it's nice to have absolutely zero dead cap space. So you can go to work this summer. I'm actually,
Yeah.
I don't know if my expectations are too high or what, but I'm excited for this offseason to see what happens. I hope some moves are made. And when you look at the training camp roster, you're going, holy smokes, there's a playoff team in there. And we'll see who makes it for rookies and whatnot. And it's nice when an Easton Cowan type of guy can come in, make the team, make an impact, have a role, and you're paying him like $750,000. It's just a piss in the bucket where some of these other guys are eating up a lot. So you need those guys coming up the pipeline. You need to develop players to get in the roster and make an impact, because in a salary cap era, you can't go buy a team anymore like you used to. So it'll be interesting, but I hope some moves will be made in the right direction here this
Hell,
offseason.
even Jake Muzzin's done. Like
Yeah.
that whole LTR situation's done. Like his contract's up this summer. Like I think at the very least they've done a good job of cleaning things up financially. I think It adds some flexibility to your arsenal, especially a team with the Maple Leafs where we expect them to try to be creative this summer. I think it's important to bring it up. And the fact that they're only one of 11 teams, that means 2/3 of the league is in sort of cap trouble. And I talked about Minnesota. Like, that's crazy. Even with the salary cap going up, you have just over 15 million bucks tied up to dudes that are not even on your roster. Like, it's nuts to me.
I know it's brutal. It hurts, right? It stings. You're just starting with a handicap, and it's not where you want to be. But when you bugger up and years passed and hours passed, screw it up, and have bad contracts, and you got to get out from under them. You got to eat it for a while, man. It is what it is.
Learn from your mistakes pretty much. But I think there's so many different paths this Maple Leafs team can do as we bring in mere moments, today's guest just getting prepped to join us, Dave Panota. We'll give him a couple seconds here. He's giving me the 1 sec on the screen here. But I think the Leafs are going to try to do a couple different things, and we're going to talk about this with Dave. But I'm just so fascinating to see who's in play, who's not in play. The last week or so, I don't know if you've seen, but like it sounds like the most prevalent names have been John Tavares, Mitch Marner, Morgan Rielly. That makes the most sense, right?
To get moved around.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people keep talking about Johnny Tavares. Like, I don't understand how you move that. You'd have to retain a bunch of salary, obviously, but like I always thought that that's just one we're gonna have to eat this year. Maybe not Mitch. He's in his prime and he's flashy and he's skilled and everything else. And there's guys that could probably use him or take a stab at him, but I don't think he's working here. We've gone over that. But as far as Johnny T, I just don't see someone who's gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm interested in this guy. Even if you eat $3 or $4 million, I'm just not sure about that. But we'll see. Why don't we ask our guest?
Yeah, it's all about the learning lessons this time here. And Team Canada learned a valuable lesson against Austria. John Tavares scores the OT winner. Let me read this promo read first and foremost. Frozen pucks are awesome when they're in the back of the other guy's net, but that doesn't mean you want to eat one. That's why Wendy's only ever uses fresh Canadian beef that's never seen the inside of a freezer in all of their burgers. Whether you order a Baconator, Dave Single, or even a JBC, you only find real fresh beef that's real juicy and loaded with fresh toppings. So download the Wendy's app. Check out the latest deals and order a hamburger that's only job is being delicious. As you bring in Dave Panota, the fourth period of NHL Network and NHL Network Radio. What's going on, Dave?
How you doing, boys? I'm glad we all got the black T-shirt memo.
Yeah,
I'm
looking
the
sharp.
Fourth period. Look at that. Look at that branding, dude. Look at that.
Wow. Look at you. That's a TFP classic throwback right there.
We're dialed in. We are dialed in. We're like, 12 days into the offseason, and we're talking scorched earth. Why don't we start the conversation there, what your expectation is trade-wise for the Maple Leafs this summer?
Well, I was listening in on what you guys were saying. Rosie was talking about, Tavares. I agree with him. I don't see a scenario where even if they do approach him about the possibility of waiving his no move, I don't think he really has an appetite for that. But B, if you're moving him, yeah, you're going to have to eat some money on that deal. And I don't know if that makes a ton of sense from Toronto's perspective to pull off, 3, 4, 5 million even on the $11 million hit. You eat it for the next season, and then you kind of give yourself a clean slate from that side of things. In terms of the big boys, yeah, Mitch is going to lead the topic discussion. And, there have been teams that have poked around, even going into the season saying, hey, if you ever consider this, give us a call. We'd love to at least have a discussion about it. And based on how the contracts are out right now, Austin's 4-year extension is going to kick in. Willie's extension is going to kick in. That pretty much makes them moot. I mean, you're not trading Austin Matthews first and foremost. You're like 99% not trading William Nylander unless somebody just comes out of nowhere with the equivalent of 2 of them. And no one's going to do that. But it comes down to really, if you're moving anybody of significant value, it's Mitch Marner. And I do believe that internally there's going to be that extended discussion about that possibility. And then you have to ask him and see what he would do, where he might consider going. I do believe, and I spoke to a couple people in his camp, in his circle, that deal with some of his, daily stuff, not just his buddies, about that possibility. Would he even consider that? And I think there might be an appetite depending on the market, depending on the scenario. So, and look, he could easily just change his mind and say, no, I want to stick around for the final year and then go from there. But I do think that there's going to be consideration on that regard from Toronto's front office perspective. And I think that conversation will at the very least happen and be broached. And then, he's got to make a decision. Darren Ferris is going to have to make a decision as part of that as agent. And then they'll go from there.
Yeah, I've kind of just, I've just accepted the fact that we've got Johnny's contract at 11 mil.
Yeah.
The two guys you mentioned aren't going anywhere. If you can't move Mitch and he digs his heels in and says no to a no move, you're basically running it back for 2024-25, right? Which is kind of insane.
Yeah, unless you're going to try to look to do something different and approach Morgan Riley. And that's just me speculating. Like, I'm not even speculating. I'm just creating a different scenario that they may have to look at if, Mitch Marner decides to, dig in here. I don't get that sense, but he may come to them and say, all right, fine. I would consider teams A, B, and C. It may not be 10 teams. It may not be 15. It may be just a handful that he would consider. I wrote about it over the weekend. I think Nashville, and I believe Nashville at some point has been one of the teams that have said, if you consider moving him, give us a call. And I think that there's a strong fit there. And one of the rare trades that benefits both clubs when you're dealing with superstar talent. And in the National Hockey League nowadays, let's be honest, that Mitch is considered in that top echelon of him being a 90-point guy or on pace for 90-plus points each of the last 6 seasons. Not that many guys that have been able to do that. So there's a ton of value there. He's on, one more year to go. I wrote about UC Saros. He's on 1 year to go. There would have to obviously be other pieces and extended, but I think from a primary perspective, I think that's a pretty good fit for both clubs. We'll obviously wait and see what Tree and if, him and Barry Trotz actually get to that discussion point. But I think there's a pathway that makes sense for all parties, including the athletes. So again, I think if you're going to try to do something bold, and, Treliving talked about having skill is one thing, but you have to have those other pieces, those intangible pieces as part of a team in order to chase down a Stanley Cup. And I think Toronto is certainly going to look at all of their options with respect to how do you incorporate those pieces onto your roster moving forward. So I think, again, there's going to be some type of discussion related to that. When and how in-depth that gets, we'll have to wait and see. But I've got to imagine, a lot of teams usually, once the calendar flips to June, that's when things start to ramp up for teams that are out of it. In forming their rosters for the following season, because you've got the draft, which is at least discussion-wise, it's trade deadline 2.0. Activity-wise, it's always been a bit of a bust, but hopefully we get some fireworks this year. And the fact that it's in Vegas at the Sphere, I think the league is encouraging some teams. If you can make some big moves, now would be a good time to do it.
Well, I was going to say, I know it's May 15th, but is time of the essence when you're trying to pull off a move as substantial as this, when you look at teams pretty much make their decisions financially July 1st, July 2nd, and then there's minimal cap to go around. What kind of time frame are we looking at for a potential Marner deal to go down, if it's going to go down, in your opinion?
Well, look, teams love to work with the deadline. Managers love to work with the deadline. So this is an unofficial deadline, that draft / July 1 time period, because, exactly to your point, everybody's going to dish out dollars, and by July 2nd, everyone's just kind of standing there going, well, I don't know really what we can do at this point. So we've seen the rare moves mid-July that occur, and usually it's a bit of a trickle effect, and then it dies down the rest of the summer. So I guess that's kind of a bit of a backup plan. But there's usually this time of year, right before we get to conference final, that's when teams start to dig in themselves and figure out their game plans for their offseason, for the draft, for free agency, what type of players are available. They start making calls. Teams are starting to do that now, to at least, put their little list together and say, okay, this player's potential, yada, yada, yada. So this is the due diligence period right now for the rest of the month. And then things typically start to pick up, beginning of June, and then just kind of go from there. And then some teams get an indication from some of their pending UFAs that they're going to test the market. All right, well, how's that going to affect them?
I think we just lost him. Oh, he's back. You're back. Do we have Dave back here? We don't hear you, Dave. You hear us? You hear him, Rosie?
No, I can't hear him.
Okay, we'll try to reconnect here with Dave in mere seconds. But yeah, off his point, I think, Rosie, it's a thing where you almost have to make a decision if you're you want to hope you're getting a decision from the Marner camp in the next month here, right? Leading up to.
1, 2, can you hear me?
We got you back, Dave?
Yep.
Yeah, so if you just want to piggyback off that, the whole conversation about time frame.
Yeah, so again, this is going to be when, these teams make those types of decisions. And you're getting your due diligence done. You're finding out who's sticking around. And then you start to activate and make those types of calls. So I think a lot of these teams follow that same pattern. And I think by the time we get to, June and then carrying on, that's when a lot of discussions really pick up, and hopefully, for our perspective and for everybody watching, like, you see activity right before the draft and during the draft.
It would be nice if a splash was made early. What about on the coaching front? It seems like it's gone a little bit quiet. What are you hearing as far as potential future coach of the Maple Leafs?
I still think Craig Berube is like right at the top. I saw Nick's piece this morning with respect to Roddy Brindamore. If shit hits the fan there and he decides to explore, I think he's definitely going to be a target for a lot of people. But I still believe Berube's right at the top of that list, and I was expecting around midweek to start to hear some stuff from a few different teams, not just Toronto. LA's got to make a decision on their coaching staff. New Jersey's obviously looking at theirs. Obviously, we got the Leafs, Winnipeg, Seattle, and so on. San Jose as well. Jay Woodcroft is popping up there a little bit more. But from a Leafs perspective, I think Craig Berube is still right at the top of that list. And I think he's coming to teams, and I believe part of the discussion with Toronto was how his staff was going to potentially look like, what his plan is moving forward. So we may hear some stuff in the next day, 2, maybe 3 if it gets pushed. But I think the Leafs, as much as Tree said last Friday, they want to go through that thorough process. I think it's going to be a quick one.
You know what fascinated me is the whole Berube doing a Zoom interview with Winnipeg. Is that public posturing? I think we can't lose sight of the fact that this is a negotiation too, no?
Absolutely. It's a negotiation on his front as well. So, if for whatever reason Toronto pulls a 180, then he's got to have his options available. Just like Toronto's doing the same, interviewing McClellan and having others in the mix too.
Why do you think McClellan's kind of emerged as the number 2 guy? There was a lot of people on the radar, a lot of names thrown out there. McLennan wasn't really one of them, and now all of a sudden he's looks like the number 2 option.
I don't know if he's necessarily specifically the number 2. I think he's part of that mix. I mean, there are other candidates, and I've been trying to figure out who, but there are other candidates that are being discussed as well. But from a Toronto perspective, for a team that needs to win, wants to win, that's the mandate. You want to bring in an experienced guy, and Todd has a ton of experience, clearly, and he doesn't have that championship, but he's been to the dance and he's been around for some time. And at the same time, my understanding is whatever next coaching gig Todd gets, that's probably going to be his last, and that's his personal preference. So he's probably going to want to go out on top as best he can and give himself that opportunity. So again, due diligence work on the Leafs front, and you have to do that because, again, you don't know. All of a sudden, Seattle could come to Berube and say, we're going to give you $8 million a year, and Toronto will be left hanging. So they got to do their due diligence as well. But I do suspect that we will get some type of clarity on at least one coaching front in the National Hockey League this week.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a domino effect. There's a carousel, we love to call it in the NHL world, but I think there's so many moving pieces to this whole thing. Like automatically when they fired Sheldon Keefe, I wonder what that meant for the rest of the coaching staff. And then you look
Mhm.
back at the postseason, the power play, like who's taking the fall for that? What's your expectation if it's Berube or not in terms of guys like Guy Boucher and Van Ryn and some of the other guys on the staff?
I think there's an openness to look at some of those possibilities. I don't think everyone will necessarily be back. Um, as I alluded to earlier, like Craig Berube, I believe has come to the Toronto, or I guess Winnipeg too, whoever he's talking to, with a bit of a plan in place as to how his staff is going to look. My understanding is there is one individual he would like to bring as part of his staff, whether it's considered an associate or assistant coach, but he has NHL head coaching experience. He's been a head coach in the National Hockey League before and relatively recently. So I think he's got at least that individual in mind to add to his staff, and then that would then you then go from there and you evaluate who's on the current staff. Is it a Boucher? Are you hanging on to him, Malhotra, whomever else? I think there will be some pieces that, at least from Toronto's perspective, if management is comfortable with them, they'll go to whoever the new coach is and say, "Would you consider this, this, and this?" And then he may turn around and say, "I like this guy, I like that guy, but I need to bring in this particular guy instead of in lieu of that other individual." So I think there's an openness, usually across the board, unless the management just does a complete clean slate. Usually there's some guys that stick around and then some others that are brought in based on who the new coach is, because of the comfort, the trust, and what they feel those guys complement the makeup of the current roster.
Dave, give us a free agent target you think that the Leafs would go after. There's a few coming up here on July 1, and it'd be interesting to see what they do. Do you think they got their eyes on anyone in particular?
I think there's a few guys that they're starting to at least target. On defense, I know you guys have talked about this before. I think Nikita Zadorov, if he hits the open market, is somebody that Tree's just going to like cream all over. Like he wants that guy. Like he tried to get him very aggressively from Calgary before the Flames dealt him over to Vancouver, and he was pretty pissed off that he wasn't able to get that going. So he's a guy that he's liked even before the playoff hype and everything. With how he's performing, he's going to be a target if he hits the open market. I think a guy like Victor Arvidsson out of Los Angeles is also going to be a guy that they're going to look at. Energy type of forward, brings a lot to the table, not afraid to get dirty, not afraid to go into the corners, not afraid to muck things up. And he has that offensive element that he can keep up the pace of play, which is something he did in Nashville and in Los Angeles. I mean, I think the Kings are going to take a hell of a stab at trying to re-sign him. It wouldn't surprise me if he hits the open market. If he does, at least from trying to explore his options, if he does, I think he's another player that Toronto is going to look at. Again, considering what Tree said in terms of bringing those other elements to the table, he fits that mold of what they'd be looking to bring. And again, and I think Shanny and I think Treliving also mentioned this, whoever the head coach is, that will play a factor into some of their targets and who they're going to go after. But I do think, at least from each end of the ice, I think Zadorov on the back end, and then a guy like Arvidsson specifically, will definitely be targets outside of guys that they may try to keep that are currently on the roster.
Not to mention that could be a bargain buy too, because Arvidsson was dinged up for the majority of the season. So you wonder what his value could be coming up in free agency. Dave, as per usual, excellent stuff. We'll talk soon, man.
You got it. Thanks, boys.
Thanks, man.
Anytime. That is Dave Panota, the fourth period. That's an intriguing name to throw in the conversation. Zadorov for sure. I think there's no doubt. I think Tanev will be in that conversation, but I want to see what they do up front, right? Suggesting maybe you make that marquee move. How do you build your roster? Because I think depth, I think you look at some of these teams remaining, Rosie, there's just so much depth on these rosters. How are the Maple Leafs going to look to fill that?
Yeah, I would agree. And yeah, that's an interesting name. It's just got to be someone with some jam that has, like he says, it's not afraid to get gritty and has multiple layers to his game, including skill, but some other factors as well, I think is huge. And I don't know, I just can't imagine Zadorov is going to hit the open market the way he's playing for the Canucks right now. I think they're going to sign him right up as soon as they can. And that'll be a moot point. But it is frustrating. We had our eyes on him, Tanev, Hannafin, and just couldn't seem to pull one off that Flames roster. But he's the one making noise, and unfortunately, the more you drool over a guy, the more everybody else is too. And I can't imagine he's going to hit the open market, but you never know, I suppose.
Yeah, I wonder. Rutherford and Alvin are outside the box type thinkers, but I think just like Toronto, there's a lot of guys on that roster making significant money, even some of the depth guys, right? And I think you look at their core guys, they just paid Patterson. Miller's in that conversation. What do they do with Lindholm? Like, there's some guys that have considerable money going to them. I know they have some money being freed up on the back end too, but like once you start thinking about Hronek and Quinn Hughes and Demko, I just don't know what that price tag could be to keep Zadorov and what makes sense financially for Vancouver and what his value's at. I just think there's going to be so many suitors involved. And if you look at how the Milstein camp set everything up even before the trade, I think they're going to play hardball. And I think Zadorov's the perfect example of a guy who's going to go to the highest bidder. So I don't even know if it's going to be Toronto, but at the very least, I think they're putting in a call. I mean, that's etched in stone at this point.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe he wants to test the market, especially after a big playoff run where he's been successful. Maybe he wants to go see, what am I worth? Like, what can I get? And maybe he doesn't love Vancouver, whatever. You never know. So that's fair enough. Yeah, it would be nice if he did hit the market just to get a crack at him. It would be interesting. So we'll see. But a nice big puck move. Like, he's just, I don't know. Some people in Calgary thought that he was just made dumb decisions and just went brain dead sometimes, but I don't know. I can't think of anything that's higher pace, faster, more pressure packed than the Stanley Cup playoffs, especially once you get into the later rounds here. He seems to check a lot of boxes, man, and I think he's growing even during these last two series, and good on him. He'd be an addition to anyone's roster. And I know you look back there at, I don't know, Morgan Riley's kind of hanging on his own and not doing a whole lot, as he's seems to be kind of the one man. I don't think he's a number one man. I think he's more of a number three guy. He just needs some help, no question about it. But once again, we're brought back to our same old problem. They can't score in the playoffs. So maybe that's an assistant coaching type of problem. I don't know. It's just, once again, we're back where we started, where we just cannot believe that this team can't score, of all things.
Pretty much. Just texting with Dave too. He said he forgot to mention Dakota Joshua's name, which, surprise, is linked to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So he's playing for the Vancouver Canucks right now. So some intrigue there from Dave Panota. We're so thankful of his time. It's time for the Great Clips Inbox Question of the Week. With more than 4,400 hair salons throughout the United States and Canada, Great Clips is the world's largest hair salon brand and official hair salon of the NHL. Salons are locally owned and operated and open 7 days a week. Your time is valuable. Use the Great Clips check-in app, see the wait time, check in on your phone, and get your haircut when you want. This question via the chat, potential Great Clips questions. Who is your number one UFA target? Zadorov, Stamkos, Gensel, Reinhart, Lindholm, Pesce, Tanev, Marchessault, Montour on the list. Thanks to producer Vic for providing some names for us. I'll go with Brandon Montour because I think when you look at the Maple Leafs, I think they need a bit of a reshuffling when it comes to the blue line, when it comes to somebody running the power play. I don't know if I want Morgan Riley to be that guy. Montour shoots right. He's a bona fide power play quarterback. Like, he checks so many boxes. Ultimately, as we know, it's so difficult to find right-handed shooting defensemen. I think somebody's going to bid up for Montour in free agency, and we'll see if the Maple Leafs are the highest bidder. I don't know if you want to be the highest bidder, but Montour would probably be my answer here.
I look at that list and Reinhart stands out to me. I just, I think it's obvious I'm high on the Florida Panthers, and to have that mentality and to come from that background and to have a guy that can literally kind of show the way of, this is how it's done, you guys. I don't know what the hell you're doing in the playoffs or where your head's at or what the mindset is, but this is what works. And has a little bit of that rub off on some guys, but a culture needs to be adjusted in the Maple Leafs room as far as their attitude towards the playoffs. And I think he's a guy that could help that.
Warrior Wampa in the chat writes 5.5 for Montour. That's a pipe dream, my man. He is getting 7+ a year because, again, right-handed shooting defenseman, runs a power play coming from Florida. It's going to be a pretty penny if you want these defensemen. Like, I think if you're looking for a right-handed shooting defenseman, and I think this is out there already, it's Montour and Pesce are going to be the two guys the Leafs look at. One's more of a shutdown guy. One's more offensive. But I think at the very least, the Leafs will be linked to those two guys moving forward. But again, there's so many moving parts because, yeah, they have some money to play with, but there's some guys to sign for the future. And also you have the whole Mitch Marner conversation. Like if you can free up that money, then you use it elsewhere too.
That's the big thing. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I think we're tied to Johnny for 11 mil. I don't think you're opening up any of that. I think he's going to be on the roster and on the cap.
Yeah.
And that leaves Mitch. I mean, you have to open up, we're running it back if you can't move Mitch. Like it's going to be a very similar team. You're going to move around some peripheral pieces, but you're going to have Matthews, Nylander, Marner, and Tavares eating up all that cap, and it's going to look much the same. I don't think you could assume they're going to be as dry as they have been in the playoffs again. And power play wise, it's just shocking. I think you could assume that would get fixed a little bit, but I mean, you need that 10, 11 million bucks opened up, and you need to bring in some pieces that change, kind of the identity of the team in a lot of ways. And in my mind, it's already a done deal. That guy's getting moved out one way or the other.
Yeah.
And I can't, I know the cards are on the table, and he's got the power to yay or nay anything, but you got to think that with everything that's transpired the last few weeks, he's going to be open to a new atmosphere and some scenery.
Yeah, I don't even want to manifest the fact that they can come back with a score 4. I don't even want to entertain that conversation. Hopefully it does not occur. For more information, check out greatclips.com. Great Clips, it's going to be great. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. We have one game in the Stanley Cup playoffs, potential closeout game. It is Game 5, Dallas and Colorado. The Stars up 3-1 in the series. At plus money, I will take the Avalanche because they're absolute dogs. And I expect a monster game from McKinnon and Makar. I think they're a bit frazzled by what transpired with Nichushkin off the ice and then the Taves news the other night. I think Colorado's going to respond tonight.
Interesting. Or are they fragile, and have they been beaten already? I don't know. I know that Stars team's pretty deadly.
They're good.
It's kind of a tough one. Plus 125, minus 150 for Dallas. Their puck lines plus 170. I've been leaning towards puck lines lately. I know there's a lot of tight games, but empty netters are a real thing. It's a tough one, man. You got Colorado. I'm gonna go Dallas. I'm going Dallas puck line. I think that they're defeated already. They got Taves out, Nichushkin. They got fractures within their locker room. I'm going Dallas.
Yeah, that's a fair pick. I just believe in Colorado. I preface by saying I had Colorado winning the Stanley Cup, so I got to stick with them. But I think Dallas is too good for them. Even if Colorado wins this game, I don't think they're winning the series. I think losing the Chushkin too. He had 9 goals in 5 games, man, speaks for itself. But it's just more so a response. If you want to play it differently, you look at McKinnon shot prop or Makar shot prop or McKinnon point prop. There's different avenues you can go. I just expect a bit of a bounce back with the Avs, but yeah, it's been a dominant series for Dallas. They've led the entire series. The only game Colorado won, they won in overtime. So that was the one series I was most looking forward to here in the second round. Hasn't really lived up to expectation. Maybe it's because it's Dallas seems set and destined for something special this spring. Rosie, great job today. We thank Dave Panota for hopping by. Should mention as well, Frankie Corrado of TSN, former Leafs defenseman, is going to pop by tomorrow. We're going to pick his brain on the coaching situation, Mitch Marner. He's always got an opinion on that type of stuff. So looking forward to Frankie Corrado tomorrow.
Right on. Me too.
Yeah. And hopefully less shows about an arena facelift. That was the topic du jour today. Scotiabank facelift.
Why aren't we playing?
I kid you not, behind the scenes, folks, we had like a breakdown here, all of us, because of like how are we filling content for the next 8 weeks. It's a fair discussion, but we will do our best. I mean, we just went 50 minutes again talking about nonsense, so we're doing well.
That's what you got to do when you're put in this position, my man. But
grind.
Yeah, there's going to be an announcement here, and there'll be some coaching talk, staff talk. Who's he going to fill the bench with? Is he going to keep people around? Guy Boucher, like I can't imagine after that power play, like an abysmal power play. You look at Edmonton's 50% again last night on the power play. We're 4.7% for the 7-game series. It's like I just don't think you could do any worse. And it's just once again, I'm just like, how, when you built a team on this way where it's so offensively heavy, where everyone's like, you don't have the D or the goalie to win in the playoffs. I'm just beating a dead horse with this, but I just keep looking up and going, how is that possible? How is that possible that roster can't score in the playoffs? Even on the power play, like 1 for 21, I just still blows my mind. So I'm interested to see what the new coach does with the staff and how they're gonna approach the power play specifically. And again, it'll be hot as piss in the regular season, but we know it comes down to the playoffs. Like, do you have the personnel to get it done when the pressure's on?
Exactly it. So that's going to do it for today's show. Everybody in the chat, you guys are great at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Thank you to Dave Panota. Thank you to producer Vic. Thank you to Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga, and we'll talk on Thursday. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.